We've read a lot of challenging texts by Virginia Woolf, so it must be time for something that's really fun. Here is the sort of person Virginia Woolf was. When she wrote one of her serious books, she generally wrote alongside of it something light, just for fun. For example, while she wrote a biography of art critic Roger Fry, she also wrote a biography of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's dog, Flush. Orlando is one of Woolf's fun texts, but it also has a lot in it that we can think about and use to understand Woolf fully. Woolf published Orlando in 1928, less than a year after she published To the Lighthouse. Whereas in To the Lighthouse, Woolf was addressing serious issues like the hole the death of a beloved mother leaves in the world. In Orlando, she was thinking about being in love. Woolf had formed a relationship with Vida Sackville West, the only child of a wealthy and important English aristocratic family. Vida's son, Nigel Nicholson, called Orlando the longest and most charming love letter in literature. Orlando is a fantasy, where we can see Woolf feeling completely unbounded by conventions of plot. You will notice some elements of what we might call magical realism, like the fact that Orlando ages about a year every century or so, or Orlando's unremarked sex change, a plot point that was needed so Woolf could explore English inheritance laws. Vida had grown up at Knowle, her family's ancestral estate, but English practice said that land and titles could only be passed on to men, not to women. So Knowle, Vida's much-loved birthplace, passed to her uncle at her father's death. She could not inherit it herself. Later, she and her husband bought a property called Sissinghurst, which had distant connections to her family, a small recompense for the loss of Knowle. Orlando's difficulties with establishing title to her property in the second half of the book is Woolf's exploration of the problem Vida faced, ending with a much better outcome for Orlando than Vida herself had. I'm not going to tell you much about the plot, because I think you will find this the easiest of Woolf's novels to follow the plot in. Orlando is the son of a well-to-do family in Elizabethan times. He wants to be a poet, but sadly he is not very talented. He's also gullible, which gets him into a series of scrapes. He gets to meet Queen Elizabeth, the original one, not the 20th century one, and has various love affairs and ends up as the ambassador to Constantinople, a place that Vida and her diplomat husband also lived. It's there that Orlando wakes up one morning during an insurrection and discovers that she is a woman. All of this action is happening over the course of centuries, and I'm sure that you've noticed that although Orlando is aging, he or she is not aging at the normal rate. In the end, about 400 years pass in the book, and Orlando ages 10 years or so. If you'd like to see stories in film, you might enjoy the 1992 movie starring Tilda Swinton as Orlando. Most of the other characters in the book wither and die in the usual way, but a few are recurring characters who seem to have the same aging issue that Orlando does. Of course, Woolf is not really trying for verisimilitude here. She's just having fun and throwing aside the rules of time, in addition to some other rules. We've read a lot of challenging texts by Virginia Woolf, so it must be time for something that's really fun. Here is the sort of person Virginia Woolf was. When she wrote one of her serious books, she generally wrote alongside of it something light, just for fun. For example, when she wrote a biography of art critic Roger Fry, she also wrote a biography of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's dog, Flush. Orlando gets to meet various famous people, like Alexander Pope in the 18th century, and has a series of adventures and misadventures. After leaving Constantinople, her main problem is that as a woman, she is legally prohibited from owning her property, which includes both an estate and the money she lives on. She engages in a lengthy lawsuit to try to get her property back, and eventually succeeds because in this book, anything can happen. Orlando eventually falls in love, and her story is complete. As you read, think about how Woolf mixes realism with fantasy. She's given herself license to take the book in any direction as the Spirit moves her. What's the effect of this on you as a reader? And how would you compare this book to Woolf's other novels that we've read this semester? Orlando is easier in one way because there's a lot less stream of consciousness in it, but it still wrestles with important ideas and explores big questions in the arts, society, law, and so on. Do you think Woolf's critiques hit us differently because of the nature of the book?